The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Saturdays or Sundays, SOR Media, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this broadcast or podcast without the express written consent of SOR Media is strictly prohibited. Listener discretion is advised. Are you experienced? Then come own the night with us.
Little brother has taken control, shoveling dirt in every hole. Predators to condemn your soul, watching you and watching me. We're all
stationed atop the mountains of British Columbia, live from SOR headquarters. This is Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott.
We live behind glass curtains and act like nothing's wrong. Soon you will belong.
You can follow us on our website, spacedoutradio.com, and on Spaced Out Radio on iTunes. You can follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, and on Instagram at Dave Scott SOR, on Facebook at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio.
Brother wants to make headlines, be immortalized. Everyone's got an electric eye with the digital spies. They've watched you for so long. I know you're out there somewhere watching me.
Buckle up, space travelers. It's time to go for a ride on Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott.
I know you're out there somewhere. We've watched you for so long. Wait for you to fall. We'll expose you all. I know you're out there somewhere watching me. Little brother wants to make headlines, be immortalized. Everyone's got an electric eye where the digital...
It's Monday, August 20th, Tuesday, August 21st, if you're on the East Coast or across the pond. And this, my friends, is Spaced Out Radio. Hope you had a great day and night to kick off your brand new week. I am your host, Dave Scott, broadcasting to you live from the Great White North on top of the mountains of central British Columbia, right here at SOR headquarters. We are 150,000 strong nightly on the SOR radio network and Deep Talk Radio, and we say hello to each and every one of you. Take the time to listen to our archives. They are free on our YouTube channel. Go to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Just do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you. You can rock out to Bumblefoot, shop at our store, read up on the encounter online, and so much more. Tickets are officially on sale for the first annual Caribou Paracon presented by Spaced Out Radio and the Canadian Society of Questers. That's September 28th through 30th right here in beautiful 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia. Grant Cameron, Lorian Fenton, David Weatherly, Ross Allison, and so many more will be speaking that weekend. Questers.ca is the place to go. That's Questers.ca. Click on the Fall Conference. Get your tickets right now. Tonight's show is brought to you by the YouTube channel Ensuho. Sebastian Martin brings high-quality messages to the masses. Go to spacedoutradio.com. Click on the Ensuho banner and subscribe to the channel today. When you're a musician, life on the road is filled with ups and downs. Long days away from families and friends, cramped into small vehicles going city to city. But the love and the passion for music is worth it to many, and that's why so many people live that life. That was until our guest tonight, Steve Boucher. He was abducted along with his band while heading to another city to play. It's a strange experience Steve will talk about tonight. Steve, as he's learned, has been a lifelong contactee. The native of St. Catharines, Ontario, at first didn't want to go public about his contact, but now feels it's of the utmost importance that the message comes from him as to what he's learned from the off-worlders above. Then in the bottom of hour number 3, we have Everett Thiemer coming back with The Encounter, our news section for the final half hour of the show. But first, we have Steve coming on in. Steve Boucher, welcome to Spaced Out Radio for the first time. Always great to have a fellow Canadian on the show. It's rare, but it does happen every once in a while. How are you?
I'm doing great, Dave. Thanks a lot for inviting me on your show. I appreciate it.
Well, we're very, very glad to have you here. And, you know, I think it is of the utmost importance that you, as an experiencer, have your story detailed, because it's an incredible lifelong story that you're still learning yourself, aren't you?
Yeah, it's an ongoing thing. Yeah.
Yeah, when you say it's an ongoing thing, let's learn a little bit about you. You grew up in Ontario. You're a good Canadian kid, probably played a little hockey back in the day. Tell us about you.
Well, no, actually, I didn't play any hockey. I wasn't much into sports. I'm more of an artist and musician. And I was born in St. Catharines, lived here most of my life. But I lived in Owen Sound for a few years too, on and off. My family couldn't decide where they wanted to live, so they moved back and forth between St. Catharines and Owen Sound a couple of times, and then they took a big leap and moved out to BC. And I lived on Vancouver Island in Nanaimo for a while, and then we moved to Gibson's Landing, where they used to film that series, The Beachcombers.
Yes, I remember. I used to live in Nanaimo as well. I liked it over there.
Really?
Home of the bar. It's funny because a lot of our American listeners do not have the full understanding of the impact a Nanaimo bar dessert can have on their life.
Oh, for sure. I just love those things.
Oh, yeah.
It's one of my weaknesses.
Oh, mine too. Mine too. Now, when you are moving around the country, when did you start to settle down and then realize there was something strange about your life?
Well, it was after we moved back from BC, we moved back to St. Catharines, and because, we missed a lot of our friends and family here. And I guess it was around 1983 that this all started to come together. I had some fragments of memory that were surfacing, and I wasn't really sure if they were real or not. I read a lot of books when I was younger. I read a lot of Carlos Castaneda and Lobsang Rampa and stuff like that. And one day I went into the bookstore to buy a new book by Carlos Castaneda, and I saw Budd Hopkins' book Missing Time sitting there on the shelf. So I picked it up and I kind of glanced through it, and I wasn't really that much into UFOs at that time, but I thought, well, this kind of looks interesting, and so I put it back on the shelf, and I started to leave the store, and I felt like something was telling me to go back and buy that book. And it felt kind of strange, but I went back and I looked at it again a second time, put it back on the shelf, and I was about to leave, and again I felt this strong impulse to buy this book. So I bought it. And after I read it, well, actually, while I was reading it, these fragments of memory were starting to come out and more. And I remembered an incident that I had with my dad. And so at the end of Bud's book, there was a paragraph that said, if you feel that you might have had any of the experiences similar to what is described in this book, and you would like to have them investigated, write me at this address. And it was the address of his publisher. So anyway, I thought, well, I'm going to ask my dad if he remembers this, because if he confirms it, then it must be real. It's not a dream. So I went to my dad and I asked him, and I described what I was remembering. And he looked at me with this shocked expression on his face. And he said, yes. He says, I remember that. And I thought that was a dream. And so we were both kind of had goosebumps, because this was the first confirmation that I had that this was real, that it wasn't just something like a dream I was remembering. And so I decided at that moment to write to Budd Hopkins and ask him to put me in touch with somebody to investigate the case for me. Well, a couple of weeks later, he phoned the house, and he got my mother on the phone, and she called me and she said, Budd Hopkins is on the phone. I almost fell off my chair. I couldn't believe that he would actually call me, And so I spoke to him, and he said that he had reason to believe from my letter that I may have had some UFO incidents happen, and perhaps an abduction. And so he said, do you have a vacation coming up, any vacation time? And I said, yeah, I have a week coming up. I was going to go up to Owen Sound to visit my friend up there, but he said, well, would it be possible for you to come to Manhattan? He said, you can stay in my studio. And he said, what I'd like to do is schedule 3 hypnosis sessions for you, and a session with a behavioral therapist who will give you some tests to make sure that you're not crazy, or that you're not doing this for attention or whatever. And he said, would that be possible? And I said, well, I guess so, but how would I get there? And he said, well, you can take this, it's called the Sky Bus. He said it's, I think it's a DC-10 flight that a lot of executives were taking this, because it was a smaller plane, and the prices were a lot better than a regular airfare. And so he said I could have someone meet you at the airport and bring you to my studio. And so we arranged for me to take this flight, and I went off to Manhattan. Yeah. And so when I got to the airport, there was a guy there with blonde hair, and he had a sign in his hand that it said Budd Hopkins on it. And so I walked over to him and I said, I think you might be looking for me. And he introduced himself as Ted Boucher. Ted Boucher was a very good friend of Bud's. And he co-wrote a book called Incident at Kelly with Isabel Davis. And you can probably still find that on the internet. But anyway, he took me by cab. We went to the studio in Manhattan, and he gave me a key and brought me in. It was a fully furnished studio with a little kitchen area and a large bedroom with a king-size bed. And the rest was basically Bud's studio. He was an artist, and he used to do a lot of paintings of these kind of strange-looking abstract beings that he called guardians. And I found out that Dr. Aphrodite Clamar, that did the hypnosis sessions on the people in his book, he was actually paying her with his artwork because she was a big fan of his artwork, and it was worth money. So that's how he managed to do a lot of the sessions on people that he worked with,
right.
Clients.
So when you finally figured out this was Budd Hopkins you were talking to, what was going through your head? I mean, all of a sudden you got to be thinking, oh boy, this is real. This is no turning back now.
Well, I felt like I was about to embark on a major adventure. And so anyway, Ted Blocher explained to me that Bud wouldn't be coming, that he was at his house in Cape Cod, but he had a schedule of the sessions and where to go and who to meet. And so I said, oh, well, I was a bit disappointed. I was hoping he'd be there. But anyway, it turned out that he showed up about halfway through the week. And he actually ended up doing the third hypnosis session himself on me. And so anyway, I went to visit this behavioral therapist, first of all. And she was a vegetarian, and that was kind of odd for me because I was a meatitarian, and I used to like my meat. And she invited me for lunch, and she gave me all this vegetarian food, and some of it was a smoothie that she'd made with sunflower seeds, and it was absolutely horrible. It tasted like wallpaper paste or something, you know. But I managed to get through it, and I ate the meal, and she gave me a few tests. She gave me the Rorschach test, which is where you look at these ink blots and try to see if you see patterns in them and describe them. And she gave me an IQ test and another test on the history of the United States, where I had to name so many presidents and stuff like that. And I thought that was a little bit strange because I was Canadian, but it turned out I knew more about American history than I did about Canadian history, so it worked out pretty good. Anyway, yeah, so I got through the tests okay, and things worked out there. And so I went and had 2 of the hypnosis sessions with Dr. Aphrodite Clamar in her office. And right off the bat, the first session, I got to the incident that I call the van incident. It turns out I've had somewhere around 7 experiences, abductions. I prefer to call them visitations, but the main one is the one I call the van incident, and that was the experience I had when I was about 17 with my band. And
right, and that's an important case, because at that time when you were going on tour and just rock and rolling, I mean, you just wanted to have some fun on the road. I mean, get away from everything.
Yeah, well, we played. We were the house band at this bar in Niagara-on-the-Lake. I think it was called the American Hotel, and we played there for almost a year, and then they changed hands, and we didn't really like the new owners that much, but so we left. But one of the times that we played there, the drummer, as we were packing up at the end of it, he said, I got invited to play at a party in Niagara, or not Niagara-on-the-Lake, at Vineland, I think it was. And so he said, if you guys aren't too tired, do you want to go and play a set? He says, I don't want to stay up too late, but we could play one set and then leave. And so we said, sure, because we were up for that. So we drove to Vineland and found the place and went in and set up our equipment in the living room. And we had to remove a pole lamp in the corner that left a mark on the ceiling. And that was significant because later on, when the case was investigated by QFORN, the Canadian UFO Research Network, we found that house and we found the mark on the ceiling where the pole lamp had been. But anyway, getting back to the story, we set up our equipment and we played a set. And then we started to pack up and leave. And as we were packing our stuff up and putting it in the van, a guy came up to us that none of us knew. And he had gone to the party to meet a friend of his there, and his friend didn't show up. And his friend was his validation for being there. So he was kind of like an outcast because nobody knew him. And he said, are you guys going back to St. Catharines? And we said, yeah. And he said, do you mind if I get a lift with you? So we said, okay. So anyway, he joined us. And so there was the guitarist driving. Now, I'm going to give pseudonyms for their names because...
Yeah, not a problem.
Yeah. So the guitarist, we'll call him Tom. The drummer was sitting in the passenger seat. I'm going to call him Sam. And there was, those were the only two seats. And in the back was basically a cargo area. The hitchhiker was sitting in the back corner. And I was sitting on, I think I was sitting on one of the amps. And we had all the drums in the back there. And the guitarist's girlfriend and our bass player. So there was 5 of us all together.
So you guys start making the way back to St. Catharines, Ontario, and here you are just kind of all worn out. You've played, pretty much a full night and a bit of music. I mean, you're only 17 years old. You got to be pretty worn out at that time. Take us to when all of a sudden things started getting a little weird.
Okay. Actually, there were 6 of us. Sorry. So we were coming back from that party, and we noticed that the entrance to the Queen Elizabeth Highway at Vineland was closed, and so we decided to take the service road back. So we got on the North Service Road and we started heading back, and we figured we'd jump on the QEW at the next entrance. So we're driving along, and all of a sudden we're talking to this hitchhiker that was with us, and suddenly the van stops. And I said, why are we stopping? And so Tom, our guitarist, says, well, you better take a look at this because you're not going to believe me if I tell you. So I sort of looked over the seat, and further down the road, there was a restaurant there that, and there was this saucer-shaped craft that was sitting right there, sort of adjacent to the parking lot, blocking the road ahead of us. And it had all these lights on. There was like red lights around the perimeter. It had like what looked like little searchlights of different colors kind of panning back and forth over the asphalt. And there were portholes in it. And so we were wondering, what the heck is this thing? Like this was about maybe 3 a.m, something like that, and we're wondering, like, why is this thing out there with all these lights on? And so Tom said, any ideas what it might be? And I said, well, maybe it's a movie prop. Maybe they're shooting a movie or something. And he said, well, why would they be shooting a movie at 3 a.m. with this thing with all its lights on? And it just seemed kind of strange. And none of us wanted to go near the thing because we would have had to try to get around it somehow to continue. So we decided to double back and take the back roads back to St. Catharines instead of the highway. So anyway, the driver, all of a sudden, the van starts moving toward it. And the driver's turning the steering wheel. And I said, why are we still going toward it? I said, I thought you were going to turn around. And he says, I'm trying. And he's got the steering wheel cranked all the way over to the left, and nothing was happening. We were still heading toward this thing. And I says, well, put on the brake. And he says, I'm trying. And he's stomping on the brake, and nothing's working. And we're just moving towards this thing. And then I noticed that I wasn't feeling any of the bumps in the road that you'd normally feel when you're driving. And so it was like we had been lifted off the road slightly and being pulled towards this thing by some kind of tractor beam or something like that, you know. And so we were going toward it pretty fast, and we're all kind of panicking in the back of the van. And I was actually bracing for impact because we were heading toward it so quickly. I thought we were going to hit it. And so anyway, when we got up to it, about maybe 20 feet away, the van settled back onto the road, and it wouldn't start. Nothing would work. And so we were all kind of yelling and talking at once, and panicking. And so the drummer, Sam, he was kind of like the voice of reason, and he turned around and he said, everybody shut up. And so we immediately stopped, and he said, I don't know what this thing is, but he said, if we just all be extremely quiet and not move so they don't see any movement, then maybe they'll just leave us alone. So
always takes a drummer to be the voice of reason to get things organized, right?
Yeah. So anyway, that's what we decided to do. We went with that plan, and we were extremely quiet and didn't move. And the drummer and the guitarist both had a clear view of this thing. They were facing straight ahead, looking directly at it. And so then all of a sudden I heard somebody, I think it was the guitarist, said, oh no. And I said, what is it? He said, they're getting out. And I said, I want to see. And they said, no, stay down. And I said, well, what do they look like? And the drummer said, they're just little guys. And I said, little guys? And he said, yeah. And so they were coming toward the van, and we could hear them trying the doors, and we had all the doors locked. And so there was one side window in the back of the van, and I was looking out that window, and I saw this alien head go by, and it just kind of floated by like
eerie.
Yeah, and it was like a grayish-skinned being with a very large head and large black eyes that kind of curved up around the side of its head a bit, so it could actually look into the van on a 90-degree angle and see us. And so we could hear them, that they were outside in the back of the van. And then for some unknown reason, this stranger, this hitchhiker that we picked up at the party, suddenly reached over and opened the back door. And
You must have all of a sudden been like, what the hell are you doing? Why are you doing this right now?
Exactly. And so I grabbed the mic stand because I thought if these things are coming in and we're under attack, I want to be able to defend myself. And so as soon as the door flew open, I saw 3 or 4 of these gray entities standing there in a row looking into the van. And the one in the front, which I presume to be the leader, he kind of floated up into the back of the van and came right in. And I was trying to move, and I found that I was completely paralyzed. I couldn't move, and nobody seemed to be able to move. We were just paralyzed there. So he started looking around at us, and I could hear him in my head. When I looked at his eyes, I could hear everything he was saying in my head. It was telepathic. And he said, I'm sorry, but he said, I had to temporarily paralyze you because you were thinking thoughts of violence, and I was concerned for my safety and the safety of my crew. And he said, we don't mean you any harm. He said, we're here on a peaceful mission, and we just want to run some tests on 2 or 3 of you, and then we'll bring you back and you can be on your way. And he said, we don't mean to harm any of you. And so that calmed me down quite a bit, because once I realized that they didn't intend to hurt us and that we weren't in danger, I felt a lot better. So he said, I'm going to pick 3 of you. And so he looked at the stranger and he said, you. And then he looked at the bass player and he said, you. And then he looked at me. And when he looked at me, I looked down. I didn't want to look at his eyes because as far as I was concerned, if I don't look at his eyes, I can't hear him. And but the silence was overpowering at that point, and I glanced up, and as soon as I made eye contact with him, I heard him say, and you. So he said, would you follow me, please? And he turned around and started to leave the van. But as he was leaving, we had the snare drum still on its stand in the back of the van, and somehow his foot got caught in the stand of the snare drum and knocked it over. And the drum rolled out the back of the van and hit the pavement, and immediately one of the other beings picked it up and started looking at it. And so I got out, and I had my flutes I used to keep in this burlap bag, and I bring them with me wherever I went, So I grabbed my bag of flutes, and I got out, and the bass player got out, and he saw that I was bringing my flutes with me, and he kind of laughed, and he said, what are you going to do, play them a song? And so I said, no, I just want to bring them with me. And so
why the bass player, though? Honestly, and I'm going to throw a little humor into this. I mean, why the bass player? The bass player is like the most unlucky guy in the band. Nobody ever knows who the bass player is. Very rarely, besides maybe Geddy Lee and Duff McKagan.
Yeah. Well, this fellow, he was always kind of in the background, and you're right, he wasn't really noticed that much. He had big, thick glasses that looked like pop bottle glasses at the time, and so anyway, the leader took the drum from the other being, and he turned to me and he said, is this yours? And I said, no. And he said, who does it belong to? And I said, it belongs to him. And I pointed to the drummer, who was still sitting in the front seat. And he gave me this nasty look like, oh, I wish you hadn't have done that, And so the leader turned to the other being that had picked up the drum, and he said, "Go and get him." So the other being went around, and I guess he managed to convince the drummer to get out, and brought him around to the back of the van. And the leader was holding the drum, and he said, "Is this yours?" And the drummer, Sam, he said, "Yes." And the being said, "Is it damaged?" And he took it, and he said, "No, it looks okay." And he just laid it down on the floor of the van. And at that point, the drummer ended up coming along with us. So there was the four of us going. And Anne Marie, the girlfriend of the guitarist, and the guitarist himself stayed behind in the van. And the rest of us were ushered around the side of the van, and the beings told us that we'll be going on the ship. And he said, "What I want you to do is turn to your left and face the back of the person in front of you." And he said, "We're all going to go on the ship as one unit." And he said, when we do this, he said that, I think he called it the transport or something. He said, "We're all going to move as one unit." And he said, "Don't look to the left and don't look to the right. Just keep facing the person in front of you." And he said, "And when we go onto the ship, don't touch the hull." And so anyway, we're all standing in a row, and I'm looking at the drummer in front of me. He was wearing a black leather jacket at the time, and I'm not sure where the other two guys were, but there was one being in the front, the leader, and one took the position behind us. And so we all kind of lifted up as one unit and started moving toward the ship. Well, my curiosity got the best of me again, and I happened to glance to the left. And as soon as I turned my head to the left, we stopped. And when I faced straight ahead again, we kept going. And I thought, oh, that must be how this works. And so then I looked to the right, and we stopped again. And then I turned facing forward again, and we kept going. So that kind of satisfied my curiosity of why he didn't want us to look to the left or the right. And I didn't obey instructions very well.
Why did you think it stopped? The line stopped every time you turned your head to look? Because here I'm thinking, leading into the story, that there's going to be some weird alien-type animals that he doesn't want you to see.
Oh, no, this was late at night. It was in the winter time. It was cold. And there didn't seem to be any traffic on the highway, which really surprised me. I think I saw one car go by, and it was going very slow, like as if it was driving on a city street, not the highway, you know. But anyway, I'm not really sure, but I know that that's how this particular mode of transportation works. You have to face straight ahead for it to work. If you turn your head, it stops. So anyway, then we came around so that we were perpendicular to the opening in the ship, and it was kind of an arched opening. I could see light inside, but it was kind of dull, you know, not very bright lighting. And when we got up to, there were steps going up into it, but we didn't take the steps. We tilted kind of on an angle, and we all went up as one unit. And again, I couldn't resist my curiosity. I wanted to see what the ship felt like, if it was real. And so with my ring finger of my left hand, I just gently touched the surface of the hull, and it felt metallic, like kind of like an aluminum surface of some sort. And I only touched it for a second, and then a couple of weeks later, I ended up with the biggest planter's wart on that finger, right on the pad of my finger, and it took weeks to go away. I had a heck of a time getting rid of it. But anyway, as we were going up into the ship, the drummer, he was probably the tallest one of us, and he banged his head on the opening going in. And so immediately, like he said, "Ow!" And immediately we stopped, and the leader said, "Are you okay?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm all right." But he was kind of angry. So anyway, we continued going in, and as soon as we got inside, there was one being for each of us, and they immediately took us and separated us from one another. And they said, "We're going to do some tests on you, and for these tests, we need you to remove your garments." And so they took me over to a bench, and the visitor was sitting on, or the hitchhiker was sitting on another bench nearby, and I remembered looking at him and seeing that he was wearing long underwear. And I thought that was kind of strange, because none of us were wearing long underwear except him. But anyway, so I took my clothes off, and he said, "You can pile them on the floor in a pile, and put your bag on top of it, the bag with my flutes in." And so I put that on top of it. And he said, "Don't worry about it." He said, "You'll be able to see them there. Nobody's going to touch your clothes. They'll be there when you come back." And so anyway, then he brought this thing over that was kind of like sort of resembled a hospital gurney. And I don't know if it was on wheels or what, but it moved freely when he brought it over. And it had kind of like a thin sort of mattress on the top of it. And I asked him, "Can I keep my underwear?" And he said, "What is underwear?" And so I showed him. I pulled on the band of it, and he said, "Oh, yes, you can keep that." So I got up on top of this mattress on this gurney kind of thing, and he wheeled me over to, or moved me to another part of the ship where this was kind of, it had a countertop that sort of followed the contour of the ship. It was kind of arced. And he wheeled me over to that. And then he went over to one of the other beings, and this other being had a metallic tray that was also suspended, and it had a towel on it. And this other being opened the towel, and there were these instruments on there that appeared to be like dental instruments, or instruments that you would use in an operation. And that kind of made me nervous. But anyway, he was talking to the other being, and I thought, I've got to get something from this ship. I need to get something, because nobody's going to believe me when I tell them this happened. But if I can get an artifact of some sort. And so I put my hand down, and I felt the knob on one of the drawers on this cabinet behind me. And I thought, I wonder if this will unscrew. So I started unscrewing it. And sure enough, it was getting looser and looser, and I finally got it off. And I had it in my hand, and I thought, well, now, what am I going to do with this thing? I don't have any pockets to put it in. Or, I'm sitting here in my underwear, and like, what am I going to do with it? So I just held on to it. And the being turned toward me, and he came over, and he said, "We're ready to do the tests now." And then all of a sudden, he sort of looked at me kind of weird, and he said, "What have you got?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "You took something." And I realized then that you can't hide anything from these beings. When they can see your thoughts, they know what you're thinking all the time. And so
that is weird.
Yeah, so I showed him. I opened my hand, and he took the knob out of my hand, and he looked at it, and he looked at me, and he said, "You know, you can't keep this." And I said, "Why not?" And the other being that was standing there with the instruments said, "Why not let him keep it? What harm can it do?" And the leader looked at him and said, "You know that we're not allowed to let them keep anything." And so they took it off me at that point, and I wish they had let me keep it, because I would have loved to have the thread tested to see if it matched any of our threads, like metric or imperial threads, but they wouldn't let me keep it. So anyway, then he brought me over to where the other being was with the instruments, and he took this thing off the table that it looked like, the best way to describe it is it looked like the handheld portion of a contemporary phone, but it didn't have any wires on it or anything. It was maybe about 8 inches long, a couple of inches deep, and maybe 3 inches wide. And so he brought this over to me, and he said, "I'm going to show you how this works." And he held out his arm, and he turned this thing on, and it shone this green light on his arm. And wherever the light hit, I could see all the bones in his skeletal structure underneath his skin. And I thought that was pretty neat, you know. And then he said, "Well, now I'd like to try it on you." And I said, "Is it going to hurt?" He said, "No, it won't hurt, but it may tingle a little bit." So he said, "Stretch out your arm." So I stretched my arm out, and he shone this light on my arm. And I was amazed, because not only could I see my skeleton, but I could see the muscle tissue. I could see all the veins and arteries in my arm. I could see them pulsing with my heartbeat. And it was really strange. And so anyway, he said, "Now that you know how it works," he said, "we'd like to have a look in your stomach." And he said, "Would you lay back, please?" And so I laid back on the cot, and him and this other being, and I'm not sure if there was another one, they came over, and they were shining this light on my stomach and my intestines, and they were looking in my stomach. And I seem to remember there being like some sort of a screen on the wall that showed what the light was revealing. And but I couldn't see it very well because I was laying down. But anyway, they did this for a couple of minutes or so, and then the leader came back over to me, and he said, "We need you to sit up for a minute." And so I sat up, and he said, "I want you to look at the wall." And this area of the wall kind of opened up, like, I seem to remember it opening like an iris, sort of.
Right.
And there was a wheel in behind it that had this helical pattern on it, like a black and white stripes that sort of were like a helix that went into the center.
Right.
And this thing started spinning. And as I was looking at it, I was getting tired. My eyes were getting heavy. And I said, "I don't want to look at that thing anymore." And he said, "No, look at it." He said, "It's very important that you look right into the center of it." And so I looked at it again. And this thing was spinning and spinning, and then all of a sudden I just lost consciousness. And when I came to, when I woke, I was laying back down on this cot, and the being that had the instruments was rolling them back up in this towel. And the leader said, you can go back. We'll bring you back to where your clothes are, and you can put them on now. And so he wheeled me back over to the benches, and the other guys were there, and they were getting dressed too. And so the two beings came over, and they said, we have a few moments now while you're getting dressed. If you want to ask us any questions, now is the time to do it. And so I think it was the bass player asked where they're from. And they said, do you know the stars at all? And we kind of looked at each other and said, well, no, not really. And he said, well, he showed us on this map that was hanging on the wall. It was a star map, and he said, we're from this area here. But he said, if you don't know the stars, you probably wouldn't know where that is.
Right.
And
question about when you were on the table and they were about to put something, almost seemed like they were putting something into your eye or trying to tranquilize you or something. Were you fearful? Do you recall your emotions at that time?
Well, I was no more fearful than you would be in a hospital when they were about to do some kind of procedure on you, you know. And I don't know what they did, but in retrospect, I think they probably did some sort of an operation on me.
Right.
But I didn't find any scars or any signs of an intrusion into the body afterward or anything. So,
could you see your bandmates at that time?
No, I was separated from them at that time. I didn't see them again until he brought us back over to the other part of the ship where the benches were.
Goodness.
Yeah. And so, anyway, then the visitor, I think he asked, do you have any bases on Earth? And they said, yes. And the one being said, we have one right out here. And he pointed out through one of the portholes toward Lake Ontario. And so, anyway, then it came to my turn to ask a question. And I had been thinking, I've got to ask them something important because everybody asks questions like, where are you from and stuff like that. And I want to ask them something important and meaningful. And so when they looked at me, I asked them, I said, what is the true religion on Earth? And they just seemed to kind of look at me strange. And the leader said, why would you ask a question like that? And I said, well, because you're obviously a lot more technologically advanced than we are. And you're probably more socially advanced and probably more spiritually advanced. So if anybody would know what the true religion on Earth would be, it would be you guys. And they just they seemed kind of surprised that I said this, and they looked at each other, and then he looked at me and he said, there is no true religion on Earth. And as soon as he said that, he said, and that's the end of the questions. And he stopped right there. And I said, well, wait a minute. I said, you can't just leave me hanging like that. I said, can you explain more? Like, what do you mean there's no true religion on Earth? And he said, I'm sorry, but I'm afraid we may have said too much already. And so he wouldn't answer anything after that. So we got dressed, and we were moving toward the exit, toward the doorway of the ship. And this time we didn't take the transport. They walked down the steps. And some of the beings went with the guys, and I was the last one. I waited until everybody else had left, and I was about to go. And the leader put his hand on my shoulder, and he said, wait a minute. And so everybody went back to the van except me. I had thought. And he said, I want to talk to you further. And then just like that, I was unconscious again. And when I became conscious, I was standing on the pavement outside the ship, looking up at the leader, who was standing in the doorway, kind of silhouetted. And but I could still see these dark eyes staring at me. And he had been telling me something really powerful emotionally. And I was trying to remember what he had just told me. And whatever it was, he told me hypnotically and put this in my subconscious.
Right. We only got about 35 seconds here before we have to go to break. And there are just so many questions that I have for you coming up. I mean, I'm just enthralled with this story. When I talked to Grant Cameron a few months ago, he said, "Have you had Steve Boucher on the show? You got to hear his story." And now I know why. Now I know why Grant is such a big fan of yours.
Yeah. Well, he gave me a copy of his book signed, and I'm in it. So
awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Steve, you hold on. Steve Boucher is our guest tonight on Spaced Out Radio. Real live contact, what it's like to be abducted, and then remember those memories. We're going to have more with Steve coming up in hour number 2 of Spaced Out Radio coming up next.
Find your escape where time has no limits. It's about living today and cherishing the heritage of yesterday. A spirit of adventure for what is new, with the nostalgia of the past. Your timepiece is a reflection of who you are. Life surrounded by beauty from the world around us to the soul within. EscapeWatches.com. There is no time like the present to enjoy your escape. Use promo code SMF2017 for your 20% discount today.
The freedom to post what you want, when you want. That's the social media freedom you need. Social Media Freedom is the free app in your app store. No need to worry about going to jail or being shadow banned any longer. It's the freedom to say what you feel. The freedom to know Big Brother isn't watching. It's the way social media is supposed to be. Social Media Freedom. It's time to set yourself free. Download from your app store today.
Coming September 28th to the 30th, it's our first annual Caribou Paracon, put on by Spaced Out Radio and the Canadian Society of Questers. 3 days of paranormal, supernatural, and spiritual knowledge in the beautiful 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia. Tickets are $150 Canadian for the event, being held at the Spruce Hills Resort and Spa. Come watch our featured speaker, Grant Cameron, along with Lorian Fenton, David Weatherly, Ross Allison, and more. The Caribou Paracon, celebrating everything paranormal.
Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski, lead investigator with U4Cop. On the final Monday of every month, you can listen to me and host Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio's Strange Days. We're going to get to the heart of the matter when it comes to what's happening out there. People are seeing and experiencing things from ET contact to Bigfoot, and I want to hear about it. Your experiences are what we investigators need to help solve these unknown mysteries. So tune in at spacedoutradio.com to the final Monday of every month from Butch Witkowski's Strange Days.
Hi there, this is Tessa Nicole Thomas, and I'm going to take you for a ride every Sunday night on Spaced Out Sundays. I'm going to set up your week with some strange tales from across North America, from psychic readings, Sasquatch, UFOs, to the most haunted locations. Come join me at spacedoutradio.com starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, and let's get weird together. I'd love for you to join me. Spaced Out Sundays at spacedoutradio.com.
There's news, and there's The Encounter. This is Spaced Out Radio News Director Everett Thiemer inviting you to check out The Encounter. Our half-hour news segment every Monday through Friday night is different compared to what you're used to. Our goal is to bring you the weird, strange, and interesting stories the mainstream tends to leave out, and stories that will make you scratch your head in disbelief. The Encounter can also be found at spacedoutradio.com and on our Facebook page, SOR The Encounter. Come give us a read.
We're bringing scientific thought to the paranormal. Hi there, this is Spaced Out Radio scientist Chris Cogswell. Join me, Chris Zuger, and Dave Scott the second Wednesday of every month where we break down the who from the woo when it comes to everything paranormal. We'll investigate and try to bring sensible answers to those straight and sometimes outlandish questions people have. Hey, not everything has an answer, but we'll do our best. Listen in to Reality Paranormal only on Spaced Out Radio.
Heading to Vancouver and looking for some great nightlife? The Moose Vancouver is the place to be. Catch a game on one of the big screens or just come rock out to your favorite 80s and 90s hair bands. Great food starting at $6.95. The Moose Vancouver is open until 2 a.m. nightly. It's easy to find near the corner of Nelson and Granville. The Moose Vancouver is the official rocking bar of Spaced Out Radio.
Are you interested in advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Head to our website at spacedoutradio.com and click on our advertising tab. There, you will find an assortment of ways you can get your product out there with us, from radio commercials to banners and social media. Have a product you like our hosts to endorse? We can do that too. Visit spacedoutradio.com for more details.
Do you want to know what's really going on in your world? Do you have questions about who you can trust in the mainstream media? Then look no further than the Rebel Planet. Come get the straight answers right here at spacedoutradio.com. Join me, Jamie Sexton, creator of Rebel Planet News, as I fill you in on the stories behind the stories. All you truth seekers, be sure to tune in to Rebel Planet on spacedoutradio.com the third Thursday of every month.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7, with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
Hey, this is Canadian Paranormal Investigator Mike Moore. The third Wednesday of every month, I'll be teaming up with Dave Scott to bring you Ghosts of the Great White North. Each month, we will bring on guests from across Canada to discuss their ghostly encounters. Canada is a paranormal hotbed with stories you've never heard, so we're going to bring them to you. So get comfy on your Chesterfield, grab a donut, and join us, eh?
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. And hit us up on Twitter using the hashtag SpacedOutRadio. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Welcome back to the second hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Great to have you with us. Tomorrow night on the program, Tina Foster will join us to discuss her research into the Beatles conspiracy regarding Paul McCartney. Is Paul McCartney dead or alive? We will get going at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern at spacedoutradio.com. We welcome back everyone listening in on the SOR Radio Network and Deep Talk Radio. And don't forget, you can check out our archives. Go to youtube.com/spacedoutradio. Do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club, a Lurophile. Alurophile is your password. Make sure you use it wisely, space travelers, as Bill sets the password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, shop at our store, read up on the encounter online, and so much more. Don't forget, tickets are officially on sale for the first annual Caribou Paracon up here in beautiful 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia, September 28th through 30th. It is presented by Spaced Out Radio and the Canadian Society of Questers. Go to questers.ca. That's questers.ca. Click on the fall conference. Get your tickets right now. We got Grant Cameron, Lorian Fenton, David Weatherly, Ross Allison, myself, Eric Cooper, and many others speaking during this event. We want to see you all up here the final weekend of September. Tonight we are talking about an interesting alien abduction story. Our guest is Steve Boucher. Now, this gentleman is from St. Catharines, Ontario, telling us a story about when he was 17 years old, how he and his bandmates were coming home from a gig and got abducted by aliens. Steve, welcome back.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
Now, you were just, you want to finish up this story. You had just landed back on the ground. This leader of these Greys had given you kind of like a private message sort of thing that was just for you, and the next thing you know, you're standing on the ground looking back up at him.
Right. Yeah, he had just finished telling me something subconsciously, and I was trying to remember it consciously. And the best way to describe that is it's like when you had a really amazing dream and you woke up and you were trying to remember what the dream was about, and it's as you're waking up it slips further and further away and you can't seem to grasp it. And that's what it was like. I was trying to remember what he had just told me, and then I noticed that because it was cold outside, it's in the winter time, and my face was itching, so I went to scratch my face, and I realized that it was soaking wet. And I thought, this is strange. And I realized I'd been crying, and I was trying to figure out, why was I crying? Like, he must have told me something really emotional to make me cry. And so anyway, I kept trying to remember what it was that he'd told me. And so he kind of floated down from the doorway of the ship to where I was standing. And he was standing in front of me. And he said to me, wasn't there something you wanted to show me? And I didn't want to think about his question. I wanted to think about what he had told me. And he said it again. There was something you wanted to show me. And so he managed to get my mind off trying to remember. And I said, oh yeah. And I thought, my recorders, my flutes. I wanted to show him my flutes. So I took out the big tenor recorder and I put it together. It was in 3 pieces, and I put it together. And so I showed him. I played a little bit on it, and then I handed it to him, and he took it and he looked at it. He held it in both his hands. But when he took it out of my hand, I held on to it a little bit. I wanted to feel the resistance of him pulling it out of my hand, so that I just needed, for my own satisfaction, to know that he wasn't a spirit of some sort, that he was actually corporeal. And so he pulled it out of my hand, and he was looking at it. Excuse me. And then he did something really strange. He held it like he was going to play it, but instead of putting it up to his mouth, he put it up to his nostrils. And so he kind of blew into it, and he got a couple of sounds out of it. But I thought that was really strange that he would put it up to his nose. And I found out later on when my case was further investigated by QFORN, the Canadian UFO Research Network, I read something they showed me in a book by Leonard Stringfield about how he witnessed an autopsy of an alien. And he said that the mouth is like a pocket. It only goes back a little ways into the throat and it stops. There isn't a complete digestive system. They take in their nourishment in another way, apparently through osmosis, like some sort of a bath in nutrients. So if the mouth is like a pocket, it's, kind of like our appendix. It doesn't seem to serve a purpose. Then the only way he would be able to breathe into this thing would be through his nose. So then it made sense to me. So anyway, he handed it back to me, and I took out the little one, the soprano recorder, which is the kind that you see the kids playing in school and stuff like that, and I took that one out, and I handed it to him, and I said, "Would you like to keep this as a souvenir?" And he said, "What is a souvenir?" And I said, "Well, it's like a gift to remember me by." And he said, "That would be fine." And he took it and he put it onto his belt, and somehow it just clung to his belt. And so after he did that, I started thinking to myself, I hope I can get another one of those soprano recorders, because I like that particular sound that one had. And immediately he took it off his belt and handed it back, and he said, "Would you like it back?" And I said, No. I said, "No, I want you to have it." And he said, "You're sure?" And I said, "Yeah." And so he took it and he put it back on his belt. And I realized, you can't hide anything from these guys. They know what you're thinking, So anyway, I got this feeling from him that kind of emanated from him. And it was a very, very powerful feeling of love. And I had never felt that from anybody, not from another human being or anything. It was just like a real powerful feeling of love. And it kind of surprised me. And then he said, "Would you like me to walk you back to your vehicle?" And I said, "No, that's okay. I can walk back." And he said, "Okay." And I said, "Am I going to see you again?" And he said, "Yes." He said, "You'll definitely see us again." And so I started walking back to the van. The back door of the van was open. I walked over to it, and I looked inside, and everybody was there except the hitchhiker. And they all seemed to be like in a state of suspended animation. They were just frozen. And as soon as I got into the van, they all came to life again. And they were arguing about something. And then the drummer looked at me and he said, "We have to agree on something right now." He said, "We are not going to talk about this. We are not going to tell anybody about it. It's going to stay between us." And I said, "No way." I said, "I want people to know about this, that these things actually do happen." And he said, "No." He said, "We've all agreed that that's what we're going to do, and we need you to agree." And I said, "I'm not going to agree to that." And he looked at me sternly and he said, "If you tell anybody about this, we're just going to deny it, and you'll look like an idiot." And I was just really upset because I thought, no, people should know about this. But
and these are your bandmates. They're supposed to have your back, and you're supposed to have theirs.
Exactly. So I was really upset about it. But the strange thing was that the hitchhiker didn't seem to be with us anymore. And so we sat there and we watched the ship lift off the pavement, and it started moving out slowly toward Lake Ontario. It didn't shoot off really quick. It just kind of coasted out at a steady speed, and it looked very bright. We could see it getting smaller and smaller as it went out into the distance, and then it just looked like a star. And we started the van up, and they drove me home, but I was pretty upset. And all the while that we were going home, I could hear that being in my head telling me, you aren't going to remember this. You are not going to remember anything of this incident. And I was having this mental argument with him all the way home that, no, I am going to remember. You can't make me forget. I am going to remember this. So when I got home, I went in the house, and it was in the middle of the night. My parents were in bed, and I went into the kitchen and made myself a sandwich, and I grabbed a pad and a pen, and I wrote down in point form everything I can remember that happened to me. And I took that paper, and I went to bed, and I put it in the top drawer of my dresser. And I didn't see the paper again. It just kind of vanished after that. And the next morning I woke up, the memory was gone.
Did you ever figure out what happened to the hitchhiker?
Yes. I had wondered for years, because this incident happened in 1973, and so it happened a long time ago, and I had always wondered for years what happened to that guy. And I sort of suspected that maybe he was planted on us specifically for the purpose of opening the door, that maybe this was all pre-planned. And so anyway, fast forward to now, after I had my videos released on YouTube, the one video has 1.1 million hits. That's amazing. It just went completely viral. And so a lot of people have been watching it, and I've been receiving emails and friend requests from people wanting to tell me their story. And I just realized that there are so many people out there that this has happened to, things like this. And one of the people that contacted me was the hitchhiker. He just contacted me recently, about maybe 3 weeks ago. And he said, I was watching your video, and he said, when I saw the part when you spoke about the alien tripping over the drum stand and the drum falling out of the van, he said, that's when I stood up out of my chair. He said, I was shocked, because he said, I was there that night. I was the guy that you brought home from the party. And the first thing I said to him was, were you wearing long underwear that night? And he said, yes. He said, when I went to meet my friend at the party that didn't show up, he had told me that they were going to have a bonfire in the backyard. And so he said, I thought it would be best if I wore long underwear. And then he started to tell me about parts of the conversation which I had forgotten all about. The conversation that he had with Anne-Marie, the guitarist's girlfriend, who later became his wife. And apparently he was a little bit drunk at the time, and he was trying to pick her up. And the guitarist didn't like that very much, and he kept looking back and giving him these dirty looks, and he could tell that he was getting angry. So I said, what happened to you after that? And he said, well, your guitarist was pretty angry with me for hitting on his girlfriend, and so I was afraid to go back with you guys. And he said, I asked the beings if they would take me home, and they agreed. So apparently they took him home to his house in St. Catharines, and that's why he had disappeared.
Wow.
But subsequent conversations that I had with this guy have convinced me that he is the guy that we picked up at that party, because he was telling me things that I was remembering that I never remembered before. And
right.
So I know
I want to ask about that. I mean, because St. Catharines is, I'm going to assume, back in 1973 was probably what, a town of 10, 20,000 people, and that's usually the size where it's pretty hard not to notice somebody for 45 years.
Well, if I had met this guy on the street, I probably wouldn't have remembered him. I mean, you know, you forget what people look like over the years, and so I could have passed him on the street many times and not known who he was. But when he watched my video, he decided to contact me and tell me this, and I was just totally blown away, because for me, that was a major breakthrough in my case, to find this guy after so many years and have him confirm all this for me. And, you know, the drummer, he doesn't remember. You know, I don't know if it's because he doesn't want to remember. I suspect it is, but he doesn't remember. And the other people in the band are dead now. And the Anne-Marie has remarried and moved away somewhere. I don't know where she is now. But so he is the only guy that is able to confirm my story for me. So I was just thrilled to bits to find him. And but he doesn't want to reveal his name, and he doesn't want any publicity or anything. He wants to keep this under wraps, but he'll talk to me.
Question coming from our audience from BTO, and he is asking, you know, usually when people get abducted, they have absolutely no recollection of what happened. How have you meticulously recalled this experience when the ETs usually seem to hit the erase button on the memory?
Well, that's a good question. And the reason is that I've been under hypnosis now about a dozen times to help me remember all these things. After I came back from Manhattan, Budd Hopkins told me, he said, if you want to pursue your case further, he said, get in touch with a group called MUFON, and they'll help you remember. And so that's how I got these additional hypnosis sessions that helped me remember. And also, when I was in Manhattan and I went to see Dr. Aphrodite Clamar, I asked her to please give me a post-hypnotic suggestion to help me remember all these things that have happened to me over the next few months or so. You know, because I didn't know if I was going to have any more sessions, and when I got a taste of what I was remembering, I wanted to know more. And so she agreed to do that, and she gave me this post-hypnotic suggestion to help me remember. And it seemed to work. So with the additional hypnosis sessions, what happened was, when I got back, was there was a UFO symposium coming up in Toronto, and I figured, well, if MUFON is around, that's where they'll be. So I went to this UFO symposium looking for some guys from MUFON, and I ran into these guys there, and I thought they were from MUFON, but it turned out that they were from a group called QFORN, which no longer exists now. They were called the Canadian UFO Research Network. And there were three guys, and when I met them, thinking they were from MUFON, I started spilling the beans about my case and telling them everything that I had remembered so far. And they'd never had a case like this before, and so they just kind of latched onto me, and they were extremely helpful. They got me a hypnotist in Toronto to continue with the sessions, and it was a woman that had never worked with an abductee before. She'd only been helping people quit smoking and lose weight and that kind of thing. So to her, this was kind of a challenge, and she didn't really know how to pursue it. So one of the guys from Q-Forn suggested that she call Dr. Leo Sprinkle at the University of Wyoming, because he had worked with thousands of abductees and helping them remember, and he would be able to talk her through it, basically. So she agreed, and she phoned him right there from her office, and we listened to her talking to him on the phone, and he basically told her what to do and what not to do and how to proceed with it, and talked her through it. So after she hung up, she felt a lot more confident and was ready to work with me. But the guys wanted her to take me into a really deep state of hypnosis. They were looking for what it was that the being told me, I think, the mission or whatever that he gave me. And most hypnotists are taught to avoid bringing clients into the somnambulistic state because weird things happen there. And so this was kind of against what she was taught. And but anyway, she managed to do several sessions with me, and a lot of information came out, a lot of stuff, incidents that I'd had when I was a small child, 3 and 4 years old, 7 years old, and there were quite a few incidents that had occurred prior to the van incident, and some that occurred after as well. But all the physical visitations from these beings seemed to come to an end in 1976, around the time that I got married. And so that was basically when they stopped. So I hope that answers your question, why I remember so much.
A lot of abductees, when they are in a panic mode, and I know this from firsthand experience, there is always that calming voice that kind of comes over you to, maybe give you a false sense of relaxation. Did you feel that at all? Did you feel that they were there during these experimentations to hurt you or to harm you in any way?
Well, the trouble is when being they called me a repeater case because I've had several of these incidents happen. The trouble is with the repeater cases like that is that at the end of each one, they wipe your memory, so you don't remember the incident. And so the next time you encounter them, you experience all that fear and panic all over again because it feels like the first time again, And so that's basically what was happening. But once they contact you and they're speaking to you, they seem to be able to calm you down and take away a lot of that fear. Like after he told me that they weren't going to hurt me and that they didn't mean us any harm, I could feel the fear subsiding, and as the fear was subsiding, so was the paralysis, and then I could move again, and there was no threat of any of us attacking them at that point, and so they let us go. They let us free from the paralysis.
I know with me, when the first time I got taken, I had the voice of a friend named Samantha Mowat come into my head, and I remember it saying, remember I told you that this doesn't really hurt. Just stop screaming. And it was completely her voice. And, her and I had an ET experience previous to that. And it was just something that absolutely calmed me. And it was amazing how the pain went away. And I recall it after I calmed down, all of a sudden being kind of ticklish. So what do you remember, if anything, from the procedures that they pulled on you?
All I remember is the light that they shone on my arm and on my stomach and that. What they did after that, I was unconscious for, so I don't know. But about hearing the voice in your head, a telepathic voice, it can come through. Usually, most people experience it as their own voice. To me, what it's like is when you're reading, and you open a book and you're reading a page, you hear the words that you're reading in your head, and you understand the meaning, but there's no audio. You're just reading, and you're getting that input of what the words mean coming into your head. It's a lot like that, and they may choose to pick a voice that you find comforting. And just as well, they might choose a form that you find comforting. They can choose different forms to appear in. And like there was an incident that I heard about, that Budd Hopkins told me about when I was in Manhattan, of 3 guys that were walking together, and they experienced something paranormal. And the one guy looked up in the sky, and he saw a big flying saucer up there, like a UFO. The second guy, when he looked up, he saw an apparition of the Virgin Mary. The third guy couldn't see anything, but he could feel this. He was on the ground cowering in fear. He knew something strange was happening, and it was terrifying him, but he couldn't see anything. So there you've got 3 different guys with 3 different perspectives of the same incident. So it says we create our own reality. And I think how we perceive our reality is based a lot on how we were brought up. Maybe the guy that saw the apparition of the Virgin Mary was a Catholic all his life, and that was his reference point. The other guy might have been understood a bit about UFOs and maybe had more of a scientific mind, so he saw it as a scientific, as a UFO. And the third guy, well, one can only guess what he was going through, but I think how you see the incident depends on your perspective of it. Some people are terrified all through the whole incident, and they say it was horrible. It was the worst thing that ever happened to me. Others get more of a positive feeling from it. Like I had more of a positive feeling after the fear went away. It seemed to go well, and especially the feeling of love I got from this being. So I think it depends on how you're perceiving it.
Were you ever, through hypnosis, able to figure out which star system or galaxy these beings came from, or what you were supposed to call them? Because everybody kind of, takes the Greys as being some sort of Zeta Reticuli species.
Well, yeah, I believe these beings came from Orion. And that's not necessarily a good thing. I've heard a lot of negativity about negative things about these beings from Orion. And the one particular being, the leader, was, I called him Rigel. And I believe Rigel is a star in Orion, but that was the feeling I got about his name. And so that is going to lead me into another experience here. So I don't know if we have time for it, but I had some pre-birth memories come out as well. And the pre-birth memories were on a high place that I was standing, and there was a being standing next to me, and that being was Rigel. And we were looking out at the Earth that was hanging like a big beach ball in space. And I could see it in its totality hanging there in space. And how I got that memory came back of the pre-birth memories was I had read a book called the Nag Hammadi Library. And there was something in the book that talked about this high place and being able to see the Earth from this high place. And when I read that, it triggered these pre-birth memories, and they immediately, it was like a torrent of information just came pouring into my head. And I remembered standing on this high place with Rigel, this being, and he was telling me that I had to go down to Earth. You know, basically that I had to incarnate as a human and live on Earth for a lifetime. And I didn't want to go. I was arguing with him, and I did everything to try and get out of it. And he said, "Why are you so afraid of going to Earth?" And I said, "Well, because I've heard so many horrible things about that place that I just don't want to go there." And incidentally, that's how I know this is my first incarnation here. But anyway, he said, well, there's a fella that just came back from a life on Earth. Maybe if you talk to him, he can alleviate your fear. Would you agree to that? And I said, okay. And so the next thing I remembered, I was in this room. It was a dimly lit room, and there was no furniture, nothing on the walls, just one chair, like a wooden chair in the middle of the floor. And there was this guy sitting on it, and he was sort of hunched over, and he looked very depressed. And so I walked up to him, and I said, I understand you just came back from a life on Earth. And he said, yeah. And I said, well, what was it like? And he said, it's hard to explain. And I said, was it good or was it bad? And he said, well, it was both, actually. And I said, well, was it more good than bad or more bad than good? And he said, I'm really not the right person to be asking. And I said, well, let me put it this way. If you had to go back there again, would you go? And he said, well, that's the problem. He said, I have to go back. And I said, why? And he said, because I didn't complete my mission. And at that point, I realized that he had killed himself. He'd terminated his life and never finished that lifetime, and they were sending him back. So I backed away from him, and immediately I was back on this high place with Rigel, and he said, did you talk to him? And I said, yeah. And he said, did he alleviate your fear? And I said, no, he just made me feel worse about it. And Rigel was, the way I remember him, he was like an officer of some sort. He had some kind of authority, kind of like the way we would regard a police officer. And he said, well, you have to go to Earth. And he said, the council or the higher-ups have decreed it. You have to go. And I said, well, what would happen if I refuse? And he said, if you refuse, believe me, there's a lot worse places they could send you than Earth. And that didn't sit well with me at all, because that felt like a threat, that I had no choice in the matter. I had to go, and if I didn't, they could send me to someplace even worse. And so I felt like it was a violation of my free will. I really didn't want to go, and he was making me feel like I had no choice in the matter. I had to go. And so I asked him, I said, well, if I do go down there, will you come and visit me every now and then and check on me and make sure I'm okay? And he said, well, we don't usually do that, but yes, I'll agree to that. So at that point, what I didn't realize I was doing was making a soul contract with this being. And it turned out that he was the leader in all the abductions that I had and all the visitations. He was the main character. So before I remembered this, I used to always ask myself, why me? Why did they pick me? And once I remembered that, I realized it was because I asked them to. So anyway...
So that kind of goes along the theory of the fact that a lot of people out there say there is some sort of cosmic contract that you make pre-birth to whether or not you are going to be taken or have these experiences.
Exactly. And until I remembered these pre-birth memories, I didn't know that. But I eventually agreed to go down, and so he told me, he said, before you go down there, he said, I'm going to tell you something. And he said, it'll help you. He said, you probably won't remember it, but I'm going to tell you anyway. And he said, when you go down there, if you can find a group of people that carry the teachings of a man named Jesus, and you learn those teachings, when you come back here, you'll go to a place far better than you ever dreamed of. And so I told him, I said, okay, well, I'll find this Jesus. And he said, no, you won't find him because he's not there anymore. But he said, if you can find the people that carry his teachings, then when you come back here, you'll go to a place far better than you ever dreamed possible. And so I told him I'd find them. And he said, well, you probably won't remember. And I said, I will remember. And he said, well, I hope you do. And then he sent me. And after that, I had a number of experiences when I was about 3 and 4 and so on, up until about 1976, when they all appeared to stop. And that thought that he placed in my head about finding the people that carry the teachings of Jesus led me into a deep spiritual path where I became a Christian for a number of years. And then I eventually left Christianity because it didn't resonate with me. It didn't seem to answer my questions. And a friend of mine who is a Christian that remembered me telling her about these pre-birth memories, she said to me, well, if they told you to find the people with the teachings of Jesus, then why did you ever leave Christianity? And I said, well, I believe it's because I don't think they ever expected me to get this far. They probably figured I'd spend my entire life as a Christian, and that was the highest I was going to get at this in this incarnation. But
so, what do you think your mission is after all of this?
Well, I still don't know It never really came out in any of the hypnosis sessions, but I believe that it's exactly what I'm doing now. I believe that getting this story told is part of that mission, to get the knowledge out that these things are happening, they are real, and I think in a way that's going to help people to feel better about their own incidents, because a lot of people have been hiding their own incidents because they can't talk to their family and friends about it, because they get this deer in the headlights look from them, people think you're a little off the wall or whatever, and so they keep it to themselves, and they live with those memories and those thoughts, not being able to talk about it. And when I came out with my videos, I got so many letters, emails from people that have had similar experiences with all kinds of different ETs. And they're all thanking me for coming forward with my story, because they finally realize that they're not alone, that there's a lot of other people that are experiencing these things. And so I try to answer all their emails, and I have some very interesting conversations with a lot of them. And I feel that's part of my mission. I've been to the Alien Cosmic Expo in Brantford, and then when it moved to Toronto, I've gone there for about 4 years, and each time I've gone up on stage at the experiencers group and spoke to the audience and told them parts of my story. And I feel that's all part of it, because when I get up on the stage there, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be at this time. So I think that's what my mission is, actually, is to bring this story to light.
When was your last experience?
That would have been the last physical appearance of them would have been in 1976. And I was with a girlfriend at the time. And it happened in an abandoned building. We went into this building to make out a bit, and they were waiting for us.
Wow. And that was Rigel and the rest of his crew.
I don't know if Rigel was there, because this group seemed to be kind of malevolent. They were Greys, but I don't know if it was the same group. Again, they paralyzed me, and they attacked my girlfriend, and they stripped her clothing off, and I couldn't move. I was laying on the ground, and she was yelling for me to help her, and I couldn't move. So I was in a lot of terror. And then at the end of the incident, again, they told both of us that we would forget this and we wouldn't remember any of it. And this building was surrounded by plywood. They blocked it off. But one of the pieces of plywood was loose, and that's how we got in there. And when we came out the same way we came in, right after he told us we'd forget, when I got on the other side of that plywood and I helped her out, I caught a glimpse of that being. And I said, "Hey, look, there's somebody in there." And she said, "No, there's nobody in there." So we had immediately forgot. Like it's that quick. Yeah.
So since 1976, then you haven't had any experiences with them that you know of whatsoever?
Not of the physical kind, but I have had astral experiences and dreams where they've appeared in dreams. And I've always felt that they never left, that they're still there, they're still watching me, and that they guide me to into certain areas of research. And they kind of act like spiritual guides, sort of. They show me what books to buy. And they've been sort of teaching me that way using books. And so my knowledge has increased exponentially since the incidents ended.
Are you upset by that, or are you happy about that? Because a lot of experiencers, myself included, we want it to happen again because we want to learn, we want to know, we crave that knowledge of the experience to try and let it soak in as much as possible. How about yourself?
Well, yeah, I would like it to happen again. Because now that I know what I know, I have some huge questions that I'd like to ask them. I'd like to talk to them about, and I can't ask them those questions in dreams. It just doesn't seem to work. So I need to see them again physically to ask them. But I think the reason they stopped coming after 1976 was Rigel kept his portion of the deal. He did come and check on me every now and then to make sure I was okay. And so they kept their part of the bargain, but I'd still like to see them again. And I think the reason that they stopped coming was because maybe I was becoming too dependent on them, and my life was taking this weird turn because I refused to let them make me forget. Although they succeeded, I didn't want to forget. I wanted to remember these incidents. And so I think that in order to make me have some semblance of a normal life, they figured it's best to stop visiting me and not let me become dependent on them. It could have gone the other way. I might have ended up working with them. I know some experiencers that have worked with them for years and kind of have this private life going on, and but I'm not one of them. I never got that privilege.
We only got about 4 minutes here before we have to go to break here again on the show, and it'll be our final break of the night. I know exactly what you're talking about because it just never seems like enough. You always have that unanswered question that you have.
Yeah.
And so if you had that opportunity to ask them that one question that you have, what would that question be?
Well, first of all, I'd like to know why they stopped coming to visit me, because it left me with this feeling of abandonment. Like, after having all these experiences and now I remember them all, I feel like they kind of abandoned me. And so I have sort of a love-hate relationship with them right now that I'd like to know why. And there's a lot of other questions that I have,
right.
But that would be the main one right now that I can think of.
I know the feeling. I'm still waiting for our mascot, Carl, to show back up.
Yeah.
Damn it, Carl, where are you? Where are you? Get your ass back here. Let's do this thing, man. I keep saying Carl owes me a flight or something. I really don't know. I want to sneak in with 2 minutes left a question that Greg has here. He is asking you, Steve, do you think most people on Earth right now could be here then against their will after what you've gone through?
Yes, I do, definitely. I meet them every day. People that hate their jobs, that hate being here. They don't like the system we're living under, and they'd like nothing more than to get out of it. And I'm one of those people. You know, Dolores Cannon wrote a good book about that called The Three Waves of, what was it again? Something about the three waves of generations that have incarnated here. And she said that the first wave is people that are like in their late 50s or 60s, whatever. And those are the people that hate being here. They want to go home. And the middle group aren't exactly pleased about being here, but they kind of make the best of it. And those are from like people from 20 to 40 years old. And then the younger group, the third wave, are our future. Those are the kids that are going to be running the world in the future. And they haven't really experienced the hardship of human life yet. And so they're kind of optimistic, and they're usually more spiritually aligned and more positive. But I'm part of that first group that wants to go home.
I hear you very, very clearly, Steve. I'm going to get you to hold on here as we're going to go to our final break of the night. ET contactee Steve Boucher is our guest tonight on Spaced Out Radio. His incredible story about what happened in 1973, an abduction, and recalling the memories since then. You got to hear this, and if you've missed it up to this point, make sure you go to our YouTube channel tomorrow at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Check out this episode. You will be highly impressed with this experience. It's a good one. It's a very good one. We got him back for a half an hour more. Steve Boucher, our guest on Spaced Out Radio, will be back right after this.
Are you tired of being blocked, shadow banned, or placed in jail for simply posting your thoughts on social media? Social Media Freedom can take care of that for you. Social Media Freedom is the newest and one of the best free new apps that allows you the freedom to post what you want when you want. It takes seconds to download from your app store. Come join the tribe at Social Media Freedom. It's time to set yourself free.
The first annual Caribou Paracon is happening September 28th to 30th in the 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia. Brought to you by the Canadian Society of Questers and Spaced Out Radio. Come listen to our featured speaker, Grant Cameron, along with Elizabeth Anglin, Paisley Town, Mike Moran, Eric Cooper, and more. It's a 3-day supernatural adventure at the Spruce Hills Resort and Spa. Tickets for the weekend are $150 Canadian. The Caribou Paracon, celebrating everything paranormal.
A timepiece is a reflection of who you are, and what better way to show off the real you than with an Escape watch? Escape is a lifestyle brand accessorizing your days and nights. Choose to escape and create the life of discovery that you deserve. Dream, play, unite with your own personalized Escape watch. Head to escapewatches.com. There is no time like the present to enjoy your escape. Use promo code SMF2017 for your 20% discount today.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on the radio, or our website including social media. From commercial spots to banners, we have it all. Check out our competitive pricing today.
Find yourself constantly looking up in the sky, looking for answers? Have you had extraterrestrial contact? Are you an abductee? Looking for answers to your experiences? Hi there, I'm R. Keith Andrews, Spaced Out Radio's resident ET expert. Join me live the first Friday of every month where I take questions from the Spaced Out Radio chat room and help you understand those from the far-off world. It's 2 hours of knowledge every experiencer should listen to. Hope to see you there.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now, the Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
The Call of the Wild is in Vancouver. The Moose Vancouver is one of the hottest bars and restaurants in the city. Open until 2 a.m. nightly, the Moose will rock you like a hurricane all night long. Great food with everything on the menu at $6.95 near the corner of Nelson and Granville. Get your horns up and come rock with us. The Moose Vancouver, the official rocking bar of Spaced Out Radio.
Are you an experiencer? Have you had run-ins with strange creatures you can't explain? ETs, Dogman, Bigfoot, werewolves? They're enough to scare the daylights out of anyone. Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski from your 4-Cop. And on the last Monday of every month, you can listen to me and the host, Dave Scott, talk about the weird and the strange being reported on Spaced Out Radio. I'm going to bring my investigations and sources, you bring your experiences, and we'll figure out the rest together. Strange Days on Spaced Out Radio. Come tune us in at spacedoutradio.com.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories. Are you listening?
You know, it's hard being the bad man of ufology, but that's just the way that I like it. This is Chris George Zuger, and I'll be hanging out with Dave Scott and SOR scientist Chris Cogswell for Reality Paranormal, the second Wednesday of every month. And our job is to break it down and come to conclusions as to what is really going on in the supernatural world. I'd love for you to join us and bring your questions for us to investigate right here on Spaced Out Radio.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com.
When it comes to the news, we look for the stories that the mainstream won't cover. Welcome to Spaced Out Radio's The Encounter. This is News Director Everett Thiemer. The Encounter is about the weird and strange stories that occur daily, and we scour the world looking to bring them to you. You can hear me with Dave Scott every Monday through Friday in our Encounter news segment. Read us online at spacedoutradio.com or check us out and give our Facebook page a like at SOR The Encounter. So come give The Encounter a read.
From the mile-high state of Colorado, sharing our signal around the world, I invite you to Spaced Out Sundays. Hi, I'm Tessa Nicole Thomas, and I'm closing out the week by taking you on a paranormal journey to the world of the weird. Ghosts, aliens, psychic phenomena, I will hit it all in your questions too. So let us highlight the paranormal for you. So come join me for Spaced Out Sundays starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, 12 a.m. Eastern, only at spacedoutradio.com.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and hashtag Spaced Out Radio, and on Facebook Spaced Out Radio Show. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back to the third and final hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Thank you so much for being with us. Tomorrow night on the show, Tina Foster joins us to discuss her research into whether or not Paul McCartney is real or an imposter. It is the Beatles Conspiracy tomorrow night, 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. Hello to everyone listening in on the SOR Radio Network and Deep Talk Radio. And don't forget, you can check out our archives. Go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/spacedoutradio. All of our archives are free. Just hit that subscribe button. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club, Ilurophile. Ilurophile is your password. Make sure you use it wisely, Space Travelers, as Bill sets a password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you. You can rock out to Bumblefoot, shop at our store, read up on the encounter online, and so much more. Don't forget, tickets are now on sale for the first annual Caribou Paracon, September 28th through 30th, right up here in British Columbia. Hopefully the forest fire smoke will be gone by then, but we have a bunch of speakers like Grant Cameron, David Weatherly, Lorian Fenton, myself, Ross Allison, and we got a couple of ghost hunts for you, a UFO Skywatch by Michael W. Hall. Go to questers.ca. That's questers.ca. Scroll down to Fall Conference and get your tickets today. For the final time tonight, we introduce our guest, Steve Boucher. An interesting story about real contact with extraterrestrials. We're going back 45 years. And, Steve, I got to tell you, I was just literally probably in diapers when this happened because I was born in 73. This is just an amazing story that you have shared with us tonight. But you also have a YouTube channel. Tell our audience where it is so they can catch your videos.
Well, if you go to YouTube and just type in Steve Boucher, there should be some links to my YouTube channel there. But anyway, I'm thinking of opening up another channel. I've been sort of moving from Facebook gradually over to another social media group called MeWe. And I just want to give a plug for them because I think they're great. They're very similar to Facebook in their setup, but there's none of the BS, and they don't sell your information off to companies, and it's a good social media outlet to get into. And there's lots of groups forming on there now, some UFO groups that I'm part of. And I have a page on there, a presence, and so I'm pretty happy with what they're doing.
Perfect. So find Steve on social media. That's the big one. Find him on social media.
I'm on Facebook.
We got to get you talking on the speaker circuit as well.
Yeah, well, maybe eventually that would be good. Yeah. But so anyway, I'd like to talk a little bit about the spiritual aspects of what's happened to me.
Sure.
And,
how has that changed you since you had this?
Well, I've gone through a lot of changes. Like I say, I spent a number of years as a Christian. I just couldn't seem to fit their dogma anymore. It just didn't make sense to me. And so I started reading some books by an author by the name of Bart Ehrman. And he is a Bible scholar, but he basically looks at the Bible as a historical record rather than an evangelical perspective, So he sees it more as a record of history. And so I read several of his books, and he basically outlined that the Bible is made up of copies of copies of copies, and there are no original texts left. And each of these copies, they didn't have photocopiers back then, so they were painstakingly written out by hand by these scribes. And often their footnotes and marginal notes would become integrated into the main portion of the text. So a lot of the information that came out in some of these texts was not wasn't exactly true. Some of it, and the authors. I lost my train of thought there. Sorry.
No worries. It does happen. It does.
The
happen.
authors. It was very common to them back then to choose the name of an apostle when they wrote something, to give sign it as that apostle, to give their writings more weight, so that they'd be considered more valuable if people thought that it was written by one of the apostles. And this was commonplace done at that time. And I also found out that a lot of the books that were ascribed to many of the patriarchal fathers of history were not actually written by them. And this was the Bible scholars' best guess, that this guy was probably the author of that because of his writing style. Because a lot of times they didn't identify who they were in their text. So it's kind of a mishmash of stuff, and I came to the realization that I couldn't really consider it to be the irrevocable word of God or whatever anymore. I just couldn't see it that way. And also in one of his books called Lost Christianities, I started learning about how Christianity was actually formed, and that there were all these different groups that disagreed with each other on many things, and sometimes they'd excommunicate each other, they'd banish each other, they'd call each other heretics and stuff like that. And so there were a lot of religious battles between these different sects of Christianity. And it finally showed me that the version of Christianity that we considered to be orthodox is not necessarily the true branch of Christianity. It just happens to be the one that won, you know. So that gave me a lot to think about, and after reading a lot of the stuff in his works, in his books, I realized I just couldn't be a Christian anymore. It no longer made any sense to me. So I went back to what I was studying before I took that path, and that was kind of sort of a New Age kind of approach to spirituality. I read a lot of books on the pyramids and ancient astronauts and stuff like that. Read a lot of von Daniken's works, and so when I went back to that, I had a lot of unanswered questions when I left. And when I went back to those teachings, I found that over the years there had been some tremendous advancements in knowledge in those areas, and many of the questions that I originally had now been answered. And so I kind of went back to that. And after I remembered my pre-birth memories, I realized that reincarnation was something that I had been taught to kind of shelf, because Christianity doesn't exactly accept reincarnation as as part of their system. But having those memories of being sent down here from that high place, it made me think of, in the scriptures, how the devil took Jesus up to a high place and showed him all the kingdoms of the earth. And I feel that that high place was the same place, because, and I feel that it was somewhere on the moon, on the edge of a crater on the moon, where we were looking out at the earth. And what better place to see all the kingdoms of the earth than from the moon? You know, it's the closest satellite to see all that from. So I kind of put that together in my mind. And also I learned a lot of spiritual teachings rather than religious teachings. I got away from religion completely. I just purged it from my life. And I found that when I came out with these videos, I was, if you look at the comments of some of them, I was brutally verbally attacked by many Christians that kept telling me that, oh, you're messing around with demons and you need to get saved and all that. They have no idea that I spent years saved, so to speak, and that I was baptized and raised as a Christian. And, you know, they have no idea of my background, and they're all accusing me of messing with demons and that I needed to get saved and find Jesus and all this stuff. And it just, one day even a waitress in a restaurant kind of attacked me and said that all aliens are demons. And I thought, well, that's really stupid to say that, because, you know, if you had a loving God and he creates us all and puts us on Earth, and then you look at all the trillions of stars there are in the solar, in the galaxy, and all the trillions of planets that are rotating around them, and you're telling me they're all inhabited by demons? I mean, give me a break. You know, it just didn't.
Oh, that's a big argument. I've had that argument with people before.
Yeah.
There's a lot of naivety when it comes down to that.
Oh,
a lot of naivety.
Sure. And I noticed a lot of them, like, that were accusing me of this. Or
I want to ask you in regards to this, because I know it happened with me, and I know it's happened with others as well. Did your experience bring you closer to God or a higher source, or push you away?
Well, my whole concept of God changed. Now I believe that we're all one, that we're all connected, and that the Creator is not separate from the creation, from his creation. It's all one cosmic consciousness or intelligence. And each of us, we kind of feel that we're individuals, but we're really all just expressions of the same basic consciousness that the universe is held together by, you know? So my whole concept of God changed, and I started to get an interest in quantum physics. And at first I thought, well, this is really heady stuff. Like, I don't know if I can get into that or not. You know, I don't know if I'm smart enough to even consider getting into that subject. But I started reading books on it, and it all made sense to me. You know, I started finding out about the double slit experiment and stuff like that. And lately I've been reading a book called, I just finished reading a book called Biocentrics by Dr. Robert Lanza. And I'm now on his second book, Beyond Biocentrism. And it's fascinating stuff, you know, that when you go down to the smallest particle that we're made up of, right to the very core of our being, in the Planck level, what is there is no different than a lamppost. We're no different than a lamppost or a tree or a blade of grass. It's all made up of the same particles of light, at that level. And so not only are we spiritually all connected, but we're physically all connected too. When you get down to the smallest particle, that's 99.999999999% space. That's pretty small for these particles to be floating around in that much space, and that includes particles that make up solid objects like rocks and tables, and and we're all made of those same particles. So we're all one in that aspect too.
For me, when I had my experience with my first extraterrestrial that I saw with Samantha Mowat, it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon on April 20th, 2014. And I know as I was staring at this thing 200 feet away from us, at that exact moment I knew that my life had changed forever, and that everything that I had known spiritually grown up with, that it was all a lie.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that everybody knew they were lying to me or teaching me lies, but nowhere in your God good, devil bad, heaven good, hell bad did anybody ever tell you what to do when you're face to face with an extraterrestrial. So that was the spiritual block with me in regards to whether you want to call it organized religion or just the belief system that had been filtered down through generations. What did you do to improve or to work on your own spirituality as this event unfolded? I mean, you've had 45 years to try and figure it out. What have you figured out?
Well, basically, what I just explained about quantum physics and about the oneness of consciousness, and each of us as individuals are like facets of a diamond, where it's all the same diamond, but each of the facets is separate from each other.
I guess I guess where I'm going with that is within you. What did you figure out about you and your personal beliefs?
Well, my personally, I believe this, that we're all one, and that what we would call God is not really personified. He's more or less the consciousness that everything is made up of. And that's how my concept of God changed. And I think this kind of concept is something that even an atheist could accept, because if you consider, like, if God was personified and a separate being, separate from us, then he would have an ego, and he'd have a name that describes him attached to that ego. I don't think that God as consciousness is personified. I don't think he has a name. I don't think he has an ego. I think we're all part of that. We're all part of what makes God up, and he's part of us. One guy explained it well. He said, we're all part of the one, and the one that is all, or something to that effect. I can't remember his exact words, but basically it talks about the unity of creation, that we're all one, and that everything is alive. The natives have been saying this for centuries, that everything has a spirit or a soul. Even the rocks and stones and the trees, they all have their particular consciousness. And I think that consciousness exists in the tiniest of particles that they're made up of.
We are down to about 5.5 minutes left with you tonight, Steve, and I want to say thank you so much for enlightening us. When you look back on the last 45 years since your incident on your tour van happened, do you feel satisfied with the results that have come out, or are you still pushing the envelope with your former bandmates, or at least maybe people that they have talked to if they're deceased, this hitchhiker you picked up? Do you feel there is still more to learn on a human level than with the extraterrestrials?
Yeah, I think so. The only one still alive, other than the hitchhiker, is the drummer. And he doesn't seem to want to talk to me about this stuff. He doesn't want to look into it, doesn't want to consider it at all. So I can't depend on him for any kind of support. He was the one in the van that said we all have to not talk about this. He was the one that kind of pushed that thought on us, and so I can't really depend on him to go along with any hypnosis sessions or anything that might help him remember. But the hitchhiker, he has a profile with no picture, and he claims that he's had many other experiences as well, and that his experiences have gotten him in trouble in the past, and he even claimed that his life was threatened. So I don't know if I can expect him to come forward, but I'm hoping that someday I might be able to at least convince him to maybe make an appearance with a hood on, or a hoodie, and with his face hidden, so that he can tell his part of the story. And I know Grant Cameron would love to get both of us on his show and have us do that, but I think I'm a long way from getting this guy to agree to that yet, but I'm hoping that eventually that might be the outcome.
Well, I hope that it does come out, because, I mean, in the end, we all got to be a little bit more diligent in coming out publicly. You know what I'm saying? We all got to be a little bit more open to the fact that there are people willing to accept these stories. So, good luck to you on that. Where do you go from here?
Well, my experience is still unfolding, and I'm still learning things. I just want to keep increasing my knowledge and putting out these videos, and maybe eventually doing the circuits where I go and speak on stage at conventions and things. And if I get any offers, I don't know. But I'm just going to keep going in the direction I'm going, and hope that eventually more people will come forward with their stories, and because of what I've been saying, and that this message will get out.
You can only hope, right? You can only really hope, and you hope that people take you seriously and can heed the word that it's not all about nightmares, is it?
No, there's it has a good side and it has a bad side, but I think people do as well. We all have a good side and a bad side, and they're just people just like us. They just look different,
my friend, I got to say thank you so much for coming on Spaced Out Radio tonight and sharing your incredible experience with these extraterrestrials. I really do hope that you get the answers that you need very, very soon. And just like I'm calling for Carl to come back here, I hope your guys, like Rigel, come back and check in with you, and let you know what's going on, that they're still there.
Yeah. Well, thanks a lot for having me, Dave. I appreciate it. And I'm glad to have the opportunity to be able to speak to your listeners.
Oh, the pleasure is absolutely all mine. Steve Boucher, thank you so much for coming on Spaced Out Radio. Remember, listeners, you can just go to YouTube, type in Steve Boucher. Boucher is spelled Boucher. So make sure you go check it on out. Coming up next, we have Everett Themer and the Monday edition of The Encounter.
This is the winter of our lives. We come to play the final scene. The curtains closing in the darkness we expose what lies beneath.
It is the Monday night edition of The Encounter as we come out of the weekend, wondering about the weird, wacky, and WTF news of today and the past couple of days. And in order to get to that, we got to bring in Everett Themer from The Encounter Online. Everett, thank you so much for joining us. How was your weekend?
It was great. How was yours?
Tiring. My little guy absolutely wore me out this weekend. Wore me out.
That's the best kind of tiring, though.
It is, but you know what? I got hit with a little bit of a reality break. I think all of us as parents go through this every now and again when you realize that your child is growing up and he's just 2 weeks away from starting kindergarten, because for our American listeners, school up here starts the day after Labor Day, so that first Tuesday is when school starts up here. So I got a little emotional just thinking about that the other day.
I can imagine. I remember my son's first day of kindergarten, and it was different around the house.
I mean, I'm not lying. I'm looking forward to it. I really am, but it's just, kindergarten is such a big step. It's that first... It's that first big step in life.
Do you guys have the full day kindergarten or the half day?
No, we got the full days here.
That's good.
Yeah,
that's the best way to start them off.
Well, I can tell you this: it's going to be easier for me to get some work done around here, because there's always work that needs to be done, and he's always running around. Daddy, let's play. It's like, no, Daddy can't. I got to get some work done, and I try and make that balance, because that old song "Cats in the Cradle."
Yeah,
where the dad is always too busy to spend time with the boy, and then years later, it's the role is reversed. I try so hard not to make that happen, man. Try so hard not to make that happen.
I can completely relate to that, because I will fully admit that early on, I was the dad in that. I was always a bit too busy for things, and I missed out on some stuff that I regret now. So don't look at it as chores. Just relax and do the things with them and enjoy it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's something that I'm trying to do. And
I learned the work will always get done, but you can't get that time back.
That I would agree with you. I would agree with you. And that's why, my little dude wants to go swimming. We go swimming. You know what I'm saying? We go. That's just what we do.
Well, that's good.
Yeah. Anyways, great interview with Steve Boucher. Just wrapping up here moments ago. I got to tell you, listening to him talk and some of the experiences, I absolutely could picture myself in there, because as an experiencer myself, a lot of things that maybe not that he went through, those were quite different from what I've gone through, but a lot of the same feelings and the same little nuances that kind of give you that little bit of confirmation. I love it when things like that happen, man. Love it.
Yeah, that is a fascinating story that definitely deserves some more research on my part. Just listening to him talk was it's a fun story. It's a curious story. I want to know more.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Especially with the way that he just, how would you put it? I don't even know how to put it. It's just weird. Just absolutely weird, because it just seems so familiar. So familiar. But, I mean, you just run with it, man. You just run with it. So, let's get to the news. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that it's such an interesting story, but yet it seems like it's been under the radar for so many years.
I know.
I mean, I haven't really heard about his story until tonight.
Well, Grant Cameron is the one who kind of brought him out. And you know my feelings on Grant Cameron. I think the guy is the top researcher in the world when it comes to UFOs right now. And these people, like Steve, reach out to Grant, and they have a story to tell. And this one, Grant even included in one of his books.
That is fantastic. I'm definitely going to check this one out more.
Me too. Let's get to the news, my friend.
Fantastic. You remember last month with the Egyptian sarcophagus juice?
Yes, that was disgusting.
I got something better for you.
Oh no!
They've got mummy cheese now.
What?
They discovered in a tomb some cheese product that is approximately 3,300 years old. They found this in 2013, 2014 during an expedition, and it appeared initially as like a weird white powdery block of something, and they had it tested, and it turned out to be a potential cheese made from both cow and goat milk, which would be unusual for that area. At least it would be believed that having cow's milk there at that point in time would have been unusual. The goat wouldn't have been so unusual, but it was this sort of what they believed to be a blend of bovine and goat milks mixed together and made into a cheese. And
how is that able to survive that amount of time? Like I have a hard enough time understanding that, they're pulling out full 4,000-year-old honey that is still edible.
Well, this was, as they described it, it was a powdery, chalky mass. And what it's believed is that this cheese was put into the tomb in a clay jar. And, much like the mummies, it slowly dehydrated and just became this block or this glob of this white, powdery, chalk-like substance.
Did anybody test it to eat it?
Well, they have run some tests on it. That's how they found out that they believed it was a mix of cow and goat's milk. But it appears that it might have a protein and a bacteria in it called Brucella melanotensis, which causes the disease brucellosis, which is let's call it a major form of food poisoning.
Yeah, I could see that. I would assume that is a little bit stale.
Probably, but one of the things that I found weird in this story, and apparently nobody else caught it, is that they said this was the oldest solid cheese that they found. Which, in my head, the first thing I was thinking was, does that imply that they've found liquid cheese? Because I picture, a can of Cheese Whiz in there somewhere. That can still be
with a can of spork and a can of Spam.
What is spork?
Oh, isn't that a spoon and a fork? Yeah, that's what that
Yeah,
is.
those are those.
Sorry, I mean, you got to dig it out, the can of Spam with something. That would be a spork. Maybe throw in one of them can of sardines that just, comes back and just always seems to haunt your cupboard. Nobody knows how that can of sardines actually got in there, but it's there.
And it's always there. Even after you eat it or give it away or throw it out, it appears.
I agree. I'm curious. I'm going to hit up our listeners in the chat room right now. How many of you have a can of sardines in your cupboard right now? Eric Cooper has just joined the chat room from Forest Moon Paranormal. Cooper, your beard needs a good tug. Need to tug that beard, Coop. Good to have you in here. God, it's good to see him in the chat room again.
It is. I miss Eric.
Yeah.
I haven't talked to him in a while.
I know.
Talking about sardines, what's frightening is that I haven't eaten sardines in, I don't know the last time. It's been years and years. I moved a can of sardines today that was in my counter or in my cabinet.
Yeah. I have a feeling that over on Twitter, Mr. Skeptic has at least 6 or 7 cans of sardines in his cupboard. He just seems like a sardines kind of guy.
I mean, they're good for bait. I just can't see eating them.
Oh, my dad used to pound those sardines back, along with head cheese. Disgusting. Do you know what head cheese is?
Unfortunately, I kind of do, and I think I'd rather eat the mummy cheese.
I think so. My goodness. Oh, Skeptic is saying on Twitter, 0 sardines. Somehow, I'm not buying that. How about you, Ev?
No, he has at least a few cans of sardines.
He snarks way too much on our Twitter at hashtag Spaced Out Radio not to have at least half a dozen cans of sardines in the cupboard. At least.
Maybe some kipper steaks.
Oh, yeah.
Have you ever had those?
No. I've smelt them once. That was enough for me. Pickled herring, maybe? You think he's a pickled herring kind of guy?
I don't know. I can eat the creamed herring, which is utterly disgusting.
No, that's all. Next you're going to be getting into haggis.
Nobody gets into haggis. Even the people who eat it, I think they're lying when they claim that they like it.
Oh, I agree. I absolutely agree. All right, let's move on to story number 2.
There is a Russian satellite out there that is behaving strangely.
I heard about this.
Yeah, they're calling it a space apparatus inspector. But the way it's behaving, there are some in the State Department that believe that it could possibly be some form of early trial space weapon. And the Russian government isn't really doing much to dispel that other than just make the typical claims that the U.S. is making their claims based on speculation and wrong knowledge and things like that. But this apparatus for testing other satellites and inspecting equipment, it's just not behaving like any of the other ones. And now they're using the term Russian Space Force. I had never heard that term directly linked to Russians. I mean, we've heard of the cosmonauts and things like that, but we've heard of their what's the name of their space administration? I can't remember what it is, but I've never heard the term Space Force directly tied to the Russians. And I wonder if that's going to become a trend.
I don't know. I mean, this is getting ugly when it comes to, everybody now trying to seize the power of space.
Well, of course, the U.S. government is saying that, of course, now more than ever again, we need to develop our Space Force to maintain our supremacy and dominance in space. And they're citing this and some other reports from China and some potential other satellites up there as weaponry. But as much as this thing is behaving strangely, as they put it, other than that, there hasn't been any evidence of it being anything other than what the Russians have claimed it to be.
I mean, who do we believe anymore? Nobody seems to believe the American media or the political side. Everybody thinks the Russians are lying. We don't even know. What can we believe anymore? Give me something to believe in, O Lord above.
You know, the fact is that this could also be, in some ways, a malfunctioning satellite by the Russians. If they're having, and they have a long history of, if they have a problem, they don't admit it unless they absolutely have to, or they've gotten caught. So if this thing is orbiting erratically or not responding to commands, why do we right away jump on the weapon bandwagon when in fact it could be, you know, another one of their malfunctioning spacecraft? They have a long history with trying to get things on Mars, and every one of them, I believe, has malfunctioned. And obviously they had Mir. That was, you know, the perfect example of functionality. That thing was dangerous from the beginning. So I'm not sure if it's worthy of labeling this as a space weapon yet, but the U.S. government is giving it serious thought and a serious look at.
Well, I mean, they have to. They have to. Maybe they need a couple cans of sardines up there. You know, if the Russians are up in space, there is cans of sardines up there.
You can say they have to, but are they using this as just a way to demonstrate the need for the U.S. Space Force? Could they be using this as essentially their own propaganda?
Could very well be. Could very well be. And,
you know, the problem is that it's hard to get straight answers from both the Russian government and, in a way, the U.S. government.
Well, you know what? I mean, that opens up an important question. Are we in another, say, the last couple of years, as tensions have risen between the United States and Russia again, are we in another propaganda war?
I think in some ways we are. You look at how many times the U.S. government brings up the weaponry and the suspected advancements of Russian and China militaries in terms of space. They pull that out as an argument in almost every discussion that they have. When there has been advancements on both the Russian and Chinese fronts, but our government at times seems to be making some pretty big assumptions and using it to kind of justify the Space Force.
I agree. Let's move on to the next story, my friend.
You know, lately, the last few years, when news comes out of Malaysia, it just hasn't been good.
No, it hasn't. Usually involves a Rothschild's airline, too, doesn't it?
Usually. It's always involving something. But
right.
Now, the police in Malaysia are looking for an industrial testing device that is used to test gas and oil equipment.
Right.
That has radioactive isotopes in it. It turned up missing. 2 contractors loaded this device onto the back of a pickup truck and left a field test that they were doing, drove back to their home office, and apparently at some point it fell off the back of the truck and they never noticed. So
how do you not notice?
I don't know. The thing weighed about 50 pounds. It was in the back of a pickup truck. They say they put the tailgate up and secured this thing in the back of the truck. They say when they left the testing site and returned to their office, they made no stops, but when they arrived at the office, the tailgate was down and the device was gone. So they, along with the police, retraced their route looking for the device, but it wasn't found. So they were arrested for a short period of time under the assumption that they were attempting to steal and sell it, but they were released under the assumption that it was an accident and it had fallen off the truck. The problem is now that it's missing, and the isotopes in it can be used, and they're fearful that it could be used to build a dirty bomb.
Yeah, that's not very pretty. And especially, you know, and I'm not trying to tie religion in here, okay? But Malaysia and that whole Indonesia area, it has one of the largest Muslim populations going, and, you know, there are radicals there. And if that falls into the wrong hands at a very, very salty price, that maybe somebody of a lesser income could use the money, this could be dangerous.
And it contained uridium-192, which is the most common stolen isotope used to potentially make dirty bombs.
Wow. It's terrible.
You know, the other option is, first of all, the idea that they put this in the back of a truck and just drove and didn't notice a 50-pound, let's say it's about the size of a small generator. They didn't notice this device falling out of the back of their truck. It would have had to have knocked down the tailgate and rolled out.
See, and that's what makes me think that maybe it didn't roll out, that maybe they were stopped at a red light. Maybe there was an accident or something in front of them, and, you know, maybe a couple of people hijacked it, stole it. You know what I'm saying?
But you would think then they would still notice somebody climbing into the back of the truck. And even then...
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, not if it's at the front by the tailgate. Very simple. Very simple to do. But I mean, the fact that it was, you know, in an open carry, you know, box of a truck, I mean, that has me worried.
As it probably should. It was also transported over in the middle of the night. They had finished work on this testing that they were doing at about 2:00 in the morning. So they were driving back to their office basically in the middle of the night, which,
right,
in my head, I kind of wonder, what if somebody knew that they had that and was familiar with the equipment? Then quite possibly your scenario makes sense. If they knew that they were transporting that and they could get in and out of the truck within minutes, you know, at a stoplight, and these guys weren't paying that much attention, then possibly. But at the same time, I mean, I've noticed, you know, when people get in and out of the back of my truck, it's kind of hard
obvious.
not to.
It's pretty obvious. We got time for one quick one here, my friend.
Schools in the U.S. are beginning to use AI not only to monitor and track children's schoolwork, they're also using it to read their emails and anything they do on district or school issued tablets and Chromebooks. And quite a few people and different organizations are beginning to express a little outrage on the idea that while they understand keeping children safe and being able to, you know, stop and find things like cyberbullying early, they're afraid that the intrusion on children's emails and personal writings and private diary kind of material is an infringement on their privacy and could potentially not exactly harm, but stall the development of children.
Yeah, but who owns the tablets? Who owns the computers?
That's the debate. The schools typically.
Yeah. Every company I've ever worked for that owns computers or tablets will tell you point blank, if we find anything on your computer that is not supposed to be there, we're going to have words, and it may cost you your employment.
But if you're a student and your parents typically have to sign a technology agreement agreeing to different things, one of the things that they're saying is that this is not being specified specifically in these technology usage agreements.
Right.
So in in a way, it's a form of spying because they're using an algorithm to pick out filters and find, phrases that they may find dangerous or offensive. And while they're using it essentially to stop or find or prevent things like cyberbullying, it doesn't necessarily stop there. And they can find keywords or these same phrases in children's personal writings or journalings or things like that. And there are a lot of people that think that might be going a little too far.
Is it a First Amendment issue? Is it another one of those that we're going to have, much like social media, where people are going to be all over this? Because this is kind of an important topic here.
I think this one's going to go under the radar a little bit. I think that realistically, the fact is that if you are issued something by a school district, it's not yours. You turn it in at the end of the year. You might get another one the next year. You might get the same one. But the idea that you're using school equipment, in a way, to me, common sense says you don't put anything on there that you don't want the school to know.
Yeah, but kids aren't that smart. No offense.
Well, and that's part of the debate. This is it's not exactly being clearly disclosed to a lot of parents. It's written into the technology use agreements, but it's kind of buried. And one of the things that they're pointing out is that this software is not there to help or really benefit the students. It's there to benefit the administrators because it's also tied into a lot of the teachers' tablets that are issued by the school districts. So one of the examples they're using is what would have happened if, with like the recent school walkouts in Virginia, what if the school district was monitoring the teachers' tablets and devices as well and was able to pick out the phrases of, when they were searching about health insurance and all of their different arguments? Could they have prevented or changed their arguments based on what they sort of secretly knew the teachers were discussing?
I get that. I get that. Is the crackdown happening on teachers too?
Well, what they do is they buy these services, and there's a variety of them, things like Gaggle, and there's some others. And essentially it's attached to or installed on every district device. So if the teacher is using a district device and the students are using a district device, the teachers could be potentially subject to the same algorithms and tests that the students are. And if the district wants to go in and see maybe what the teachers are discussing sort of as a group privately, or, not openly, not coming to the district, they have then that ability to go in and look at what the teachers are saying and doing and possibly have an advantage over the teachers.
Mr. Thiemer, thank you for informing us. Really appreciate it. Where can people find The Encounter?
People can find The Encounter at facebook.com/SOR The Encounter Online.
We say thank you to you, my friend. We'll talk to you tomorrow night. We want to say a big shout out to Steve Boucher for being our guest in the first part of the show about his ET experiences on a band tour bus. Sounds fantastic. Tomorrow night on the show, lawyer Tina Foster joins us from Washington State. We are going to discuss her research into the Beatles conspiracy regarding Paul McCartney. Is the real Paul McCartney dead? We'll find out tomorrow night, 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, at spacedoutradio.com. We got Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL rocking in the background with Little Brother is Watching. Bumblefoot is the official music of Spaced Out Radio, rocking us in and out of every single show. Get your horns up for the guitar god himself. Special thank you to everyone listening in at home, in your cars, at work, wherever you may be. A big thanks to everybody watching. on Spreaker or listening on Spreaker. Playing along on Twitter at hashtag Spaced Out Radio. And to the Veterans Club. Good to see you, Uncle Dale. The SOR Space Travelers on Facebook. Good chatting with all of you tonight. Great snark on Twitter. Great questions out of Spreaker. Thanks for sharing the show. Thanks for doing your part to make us bigger and better every single night. Because together, my friends, we own the night. I will talk to you in 21 hours from now. Mr. Bumblefoot, we need a favor. We need you to take us home. Good night.